Okay, so when you hear the name Karl Marx, and especially his book Das Kapital, your mind probably goes to this, super dense, heavy economic textbook from 1867, right? But what if we looked at it in a totally different way? What if we treated it like a detective story, an investigation into the really weird, hidden rules of our modern world?
Well, it turns out the book itself kind of starts that way. It's like we're following this Inspector Marx as he shows up to a crime scene where, get this, it's not even clear that a crime has been committed at all, but he's got this nagging suspicion that something is deeply wrong just beneath the surface of our everyday lives.
So what's the big mystery here? What's the case he's actually trying to crack? Well, it's the puzzle of our economy itself. I mean, think about it. Why do we have just staggering amounts of wealth in the world, and at the same time, so much inequality? And why do we keep having these massive economic crises that just seem to pop up out of nowhere? These are the big questions, the puzzles, that Marx was trying to piece together.
Now, every good detective story, you know it. It starts with a clue. It's usually something really small, something everybody else has overlooked. And for our Inspector Marx, that first clue was the most basic, most ordinary thing you can imagine. It's that simple thing you buy at a store. He looked around and saw that our society's wealth isn't just about, say, owning land or big piles of gold anymore. It's a mountain of stuff for sale, commodities. And he figured, you know what? If I can just crack the secret of this one single thing, this basic building block, I can understand the whole system.
So, Marx breaks down this commodity and finds it has this weird dual nature. On the one hand, you've got its use value. That's the easy part. It's just what it's for. A coat keeps you warm, a hammer pounds nails. Simple enough. But then, there's the other side, its exchange value. And this is where the plot really thickens. It's not about what the coat does, it's about what it's worth. Why is one coat worth, say, 2 pairs of shoes, or 10 loaves of bread? What is this invisible thing that connects them all?
Okay, so with this first clue, the commodity, in his pocket, Marx starts following the trail. He follows the money. And as he does, he notices this really strange pattern, this circuit that he believes defines our entire economic system.
And here it is. He calls it the circuit of capital, M+. Let's break it down. You start with money, M. You use that money to buy commodities, C, things like factories, raw materials, and crucially, people's time to work. And then you sell whatever you've made to end up with M+, more money. That's the whole point. The goal isn't just to trade things, it's to finish the process with more cash than you started with. That little plus sign, that's the whole game. That's profit.
And boom! This is the central question of the entire investigation. If a business owner buys all their stuff, the factory, the materials, the labor, at a fair market price, and then they sell the final product at its fair market price, where on earth did that extra money, that M+, just magically come from? It's like it appeared out of thin air. It seems to break the basic rules of a fair exchange.
To solve this riddle, Marx realized he had to leave the bright, shiny, open marketplace. He had to go behind the curtain, to what he famously called the hidden abode of production. He had to go to the factory floor, the workshop, the office, because that's where the real secret is. And it's in that hidden place that he discovers the source of the magic money. It turns out there's one special commodity the capitalist buys that can actually create more value than it costs. And what is that commodity? It's us. It's human labor. And that extra value it creates is the big reveal. Marx calls it surplus value. So how does this work? Well, according to Marx, the workday is basically split in two. For the first part of the day, you're doing what he calls necessary labor. Basically, you're working just long enough to cover the cost of your own wage. But you don't go home then, you keep working. And all that extra time you put in for the rest of the day, that's what he calls surplus labor. And for Marx, this is essentially unpaid work. That extra labor is what creates the brand new extra value, the surplus value, that the capitalist then keeps as profit. Your wage makes it feel like you're paid for the whole day, but he argues the reality is actually divided.
So you see, the scene of the crime isn't the marketplace, where everything looks above board, all fair and square transactions. The real source of profit is hidden deep inside the production process itself, in the extraction of that unpaid labor. Now, it's all perfectly legal, totally accepted. But for Marx, this was the secret at the heart of the whole system. And yeah, Marx did not pull any punches when describing this. He has this incredibly vivid quote where he describes capital as dead labor, the value from past work, that, like a vampire, can only survive by sucking the life out of living labor, out of workers in the present.
It's a brutal image, but it perfectly captures his conclusion.
Okay, so once Inspector Marx feels like he's found the source of the profit, he starts looking at the system's MO, its modus operandi, its typical pattern of behavior. What are the results? What are the consequences of building an entire world on this relentless drive for more and more surplus value?
Well, the first and probably most obvious consequence is just massive social inequality. Think about it. If profit is created by the unpaid labor of the many, and then it accumulates in the hands of the few, then a huge widening gap between the rich and everyone else isn't some unfortunate side effect. It's baked right into the system's DNA.
And these numbers really just put that in black and white. Now, this data is from 2007, but look at it. The top 1% of the U.S. population held almost 43% of all the financial wealth. Now, add the next 19% to that, and you see that the top fifth of the country controlled a whopping 93% of the wealth. That leaves just 7% for the bottom 80% of people.
But it's not just inequality. The second major consequence is instability. The system is just naturally prone to these wild, reoccurring crises. Marx called them crises of overproduction, which is such a strange and ironic idea. It's when the economy doesn't collapse because we have too little, it collapses because we produce too much stuff for people to actually afford to buy. The source material gives us this really powerful metaphor for it all, the Titanic. Why did it sink? Well, it was blamed on a reckless drive for speed and profit, pushing the ship full steam ahead while ignoring the obvious dangers. For Marx, this is capitalism in a nutshell. The constant, relentless drive for more surplus value makes the system blind to the icebergs, the crises, that it's creating for itself, leading it to crash over and over again.
So if all this is going on, why isn't it more obvious? Why don't more people see it this way? This brings us to the final piece of Marx's investigation, how the system pulls off what he saw as the perfect crime by covering its own tracks.
He called the cover-up mechanism commodity fetishism. I know it's a really weird phrase, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. It's that when we're in the market, we don't see the human hands, the sweat, the social connections, or the surplus value behind the products we buy. All we see is a price tag. And so, we start to treat economic value as if it's some magical, inherent property of things, instead of seeing it as the result of relationships between people.
And this image just illustrates that perfectly. What starts as a system built by people, a set of man-made rules, starts to feel like a force of nature. It starts to seem as real and unchangeable as the law of gravity. We get trapped inside its logic, and it becomes almost impossible to even imagine that things could be any other way. And that's the real kicker. The investigation concludes that the crime is so hard to spot because the system's greatest trick is convincing us that it's not even a system, it's just the way things are. It presents its rules, competition, the profit motive, inequality, not as choices that society has made, but as the natural, unavoidable order of the world. This quote from Marx just wraps up his entire detective project perfectly. He's saying that what we see every day on the surface of the economy, prices going up and down, people buying and selling, that's just the surface process. It's a distraction. To really find the truth, you have to look beneath, into the depths, at the completely different processes that are really running the show. And so, that's where his investigation leaves us, with this huge question. Is our economic reality a set of unchangeable laws that we just have to live with? Or is it a system based on human choices, a system that can in fact be changed? That, in the end, is the question at the very heart of Marx's detective story.